After it's Dalit. We did his Dalit. Okay, summary, let's just get the flow. The flow of the Maimon is so he wants to explain just a summary then. So the pasuk Shir Hamalos Sheves Ach. So there's two things here. Sheves Achim and Gam Yachad. So the Filig Rebbe said again, Sheves Achim is the neshamas of Zochar and the Keva when they're kiruv and iskashus, the Sheves Achim, which is Tanoim. That's Achana to the Nesuyin, Gam Yachad, which is the Nesuyin. Then he brings in the Maimer, the statement of the Zohar that goes on Eden and the Eibishter, and the Gam Yachad, the Chiddush is Gam the Sata, even down here. And the Rebbe said, why does he bring it? Because that's the Yesod of the Pirush, the Yesod of the Pirush that Chosan Kala Lamata, the Fidig Rebbe's Pirush, the Yesod for that is the Pirush of the Zohar, Eibishter and Yidden. Because Chosan and Kala mishtalshel from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Knesset Yisrael. Then the Rebbe has a third Pirush, which the Meforshim say that it's talking about Yidden Bechlal. And therefore, that the conclusion therefore is that the Maimer HaZohar, which he brings in the Maimer, which it refers to Eibishter and Yidden, is the Yesod also for the Av and Achva, the two levels of Sheves Achim and Gam Yochad that exist by Yidden Lamata, or that should be by Yidden Lamata. And in fact, that's what the pasuk goes on to say. So the pasuk is saying that in order there should be the yichud, in order that the yichud of the Eibush and Yid, which is the yesod of the yichud of Eden. So in order for that yichud of Eden to be, it's through the Yedidas and Amshach of the Shemen of the Shemen HaTov. So to understand that, he brought the story of the Zohar on this pasuk. He needed rain, Geshem, and he said, Rabbi Shimon said a Torah on this pasuk. So the shaila is, we find the say that it's tefillah, tanesim. How is it that he does it through Torah? The Nakudah of the beers explained in the Mamorim is, why B'chlal do you need tefillah? Because if you want to have the inyan, which is a ma'adim mishtalshalus, which is what Kshom Yimah, it's one of the keys that Eibush doesn't give over to a shliach. So you have to have the inyan of tefillah. That's B'chlal. You needed this oidus miyuchedes milamata to ma'oid the inyan, and that's what tefillah is. However, the Rabbi did so through Torah. Because Torah is amshachim l'mayda lamata, and therefore doesn't need the yegiyah and the avodah, literally the petitioning and the requesting, which is what tefillah is. So the reason that Rabbi Shimon paled this dafka through Torah, because we're changing the reality. There was no rain here. So usually this is done through tefillah. This is the time of drought. We need a new amshach. But Rabbi did it again through Torah. Because his Torah had also the mile of tefillah, which is a rotzon chodesh, and therefore is mamshechet through Amidas HaTorah, which he goes into explaining as Gimel. Just going through, getting the flow. That the chiluk between Torah and tefillah is similar to bracha and tefillah. Bracha is, so what? How does bracha work? Bracha means to draw down. So the Mavarach is higher than the source of the bracha, and he commands that the bracha be nimshach. Like the Rebbe gave the brachas over to Avraham Avinu. So this is the Maila of bracha but tefillah, because tefillah is melamata l'maila. In tefillah, where are we? We're below the place of the bracha. In bracha, the mevarach is higher than the place of the damshacha, of the need. Tefillah, the person davening, he's below, and he's being ba'ayda the inyan, asking should come. He's requesting, he's beseeching it. He's supplicating God. Mevarach, if he has that, he says, he's added in the bracket, see who has the zesh yesh lakerech mevarach. The mevarach is the chatchila milamayla, above, in fact, the mocker. And if we command it, b'derech tzivah, not yehiratzin. However, tefillah reaches higher. That's in terms of the ofen of damshacha, where the person stands. In tefillah, you're standing lower. In bracha, you're standing higher. However, the mile of tefillah is that bracha can only open up channels that are blocked. But it was already determined by heaven that the inyan should come. For some reason, it's blocked, so the mevarach has the power to open it up. But tefillah is, even if mitzad melamayla, it is determined otherwise. As we said before, that's the mile of tefillah. It's the hiratzin, that even if there was a gezerah, that God forbid, there should be a chayla and so on, hiratzin, there should be amshacha chadosha. Where's this drawing? Erin sof melamayla mishtalshalos. And that's hiratzin. Even if there is, the ratzin doesn't exist, the ratzin should be. So that's the mile. The mile of tefillah is that it's mamshech and inyan chadash. Now, Bachlal, this exists in Torah too. And then he'll explain by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was even in a more unique way. Because Torah paskins and the world responds accordingly. Because Torah is Chachmasa Yisbarech, higher than Chachmasa Yisbarech, higher than Chachma Stam, which is Chachma Tatzilas Bereshis. Again, the Targum says, this brings all the time, the Bereshis. Nami Maimer, Bereshis is Bechuchmasa. So that's part of Ishtalshalos. But Torah is high, and therefore Psak Din in Torah can change the reality on the ground. So therefore Torah has both Mailas, the Mail of Tefillah, and the Mail of Bracha, because it's commanding it. It's not beseeching. It's not Milamata Lamaila. It's in a position of transcendence to begin with. When the Jew learns Torah, is connected to a place which is higher than the world, and moreover, that's the Mail of Bracha. The Mail of Tefillah is that where is he standing? Not where Bracha stands, which is just higher than the market, but within Ishtalshalos. But Torah, he stands higher than Ishtalshalos. It's not a way of bakasha, it's a way of tzibur like Bracha. That's why Man Malka Rabbanon, that even Melech, the Chassidus brings, Omar Malka Akatura, the king says, that the mountain is uprooted, there's nothing stands in his way. But he brings here the Nakuda, how does it work? Because not Stam Torah, but Torah which is B'derech Bittel. So the Torah is B'derech Bittel, then the Psak Dinim, the Piskei Dinim of the Chachamim is a reflection of the Psak Din or the Gzeira of the Melech Malchi Amlachim, who accordingly goes along with the Psak Din because of the Bittel, the connection. And therefore, since that's now what the king commands, B'derech HaMelech. So this is the Mavsim, he says, that all the Tanaim and Amaroim did, like Pinchas ben Yoed, that made the Ginoi River part for him, that this is both milas. He's doing something which is higher than Ishtalshalos. The river flows and does not part, but he does so in the way of what? Of a Psak Din. It's Siva, Pinchas ben Yoed, the Mile of Brach. I think we have to say. Ella, yeah, yes, we went further. Somebody? Gentlemen, a reaction here. Do you remember after I say, hey, we went further? Okay, we'll continue from Moishe. Alash afa pekei the ma'ila betfila lagabi Torah. No, we didn't do this. Actually, we did. There's still a ma'ila of tefillah of Torah. At this point, Torah has the ma'ila of tefillah and the ma'ila of bracha. At this point of the ma'ila, and I was going to say no. There's still a ma'ila of tefillah of Torah kiteri chachma. At the end of the day, Torah is chachma. Chachma and chachma. Even though we just said if it's chachma says barechai and the chachma, from which creates in brackets. Gamma chachma the Torah shel ma'ila chachma the ma'ase bereishis. Even the level of chachma which of Torah, which is higher than the chachma ma'ase bereishis, that is one of the sort of mamoros. It's higher than the sort of mamoros legamre. Nonetheless, it's here together of chachma, and therefore be'ein arich legaber insof. It's incomparable to Ein Sof. So as deep as Torah reaches, it's still within a limitation. So the shaila is, but didn't we just say that it's even in Mitzad Ishtalshalos, there's a gzeira kach v'kach, so Torah paskins otherwise. And why are we saying here now that it's limited and l'chayre, in other words, to rephrase the question, in order to change the reality on the ground, surely you need to have a gilui of the ma'alim ishtalshalos. Now Torah does change the reality on the ground, and now he's saying, but it's not rooted in the Ein Sof mamash. It's chachmosa yizbarech, fine, but it's still not a pure Ein Sof. He's going to explain that in a moment, but now he's going to say that tefillah does do that. The ma'ila of tefillah is that the shinui that tefillah change causes is higher than the shinui of Torah, as he will presently explain, because dafket tefillah is, and he'll explain later why, dafket because of the avodah, the ma'aseh derech ha'tchsef, dafket because of the avodah of yid, beseeching, and his bittul and his korban, so that reaches a level of Ein Sof which is completely higher than Torah, and therefore is going to explain the change is different. How so?
You're speaking about what causes it, but I think the Rabbi is addressing perhaps that chachma. You're saying what elicits Torah and what elicits tefillah.
That's what he's explaining now. He's trying to explain why. He's explaining why both are higher than ishtalshalos.
Correct.
Nonetheless, tefillah is higher, reaches higher.
He's maybe saying one comes mitzad chachma, which is lower, and one mitzad rotzen, which is higher.
So I'm asking. Of course, he's stating that. The question is, but both of them appel a change on the ground, higher than ishtalshalos.
Okay.
So what does it mean? What does it mean? The whole point is that Torah changes the reality. The psulah chayzra, so virginity returns, and Torah paskins, and that's the reality. L'chayra for that to happen, and he said that earlier outright. That's l'mayla mishtalshalos, l'mayla than a chachma of creation. But now he's saying that tefillah is higher still, and so we have to understand that. Yeah, it's higher. What does it mean that it's higher? It's higher than the Ritzonis Baruch. L'chayra both are higher than ishtalshalos. Varaya both change the reality on the ground. That's you're going to explain right now. That's the yeshleima. What's the hasbara here? How does Torah change reality on the ground? He said out clearly that it's higher than ishtalshalos, and tefillah is higher still. Higher than ishtalshalos is higher than ishtalshalos. So he did give us the geographical language. This is chachma higher than ishtalshalos. What does that mean? Higher than the system is higher than the system. Bligvul is bligvul. Varaya, it changes the reality of Teva. The river flows, and he says, no, it doesn't flow. And does the miracle get bigger than that? So the answer is, so the chiddush of the Rashbi, that, and he's going to say now that only the Rashbi had the ma'ila of tefillah in his Torah. They did not, even though they changed the reality. So let's put this all together. What's going on? Answer. The chiddush of the Rashbi, there's mamshech chiddush akshamad mitzad Torah lagabi amayvsim matzumim. So the chiddush of the Rashbi that he was mamshich reign through saying Torah over the awesome, powerful mufsim. In order 30, you see that's the lashon of Likutei Torah. Yeah, by the way, look at order 28. That through Torah, Pinchas ben Yair was pale the chalukas hanod who lefisha gilish and nimshach adei Torah who l'mayla mishtalshalos. Now he's going to explain in the Mayla Mishtalshalos Gufa the chiddush of Tefillah, which exists only by the B'Shim B'Yachais Torah. So first they can explain the mufsim that were done by the other Tanoim and Amaroim that was done through Torah, which means what? Who is follows. The change in the world that they did, they revealed, and here comes the key words, Shekein hu al pi chochmas haTorah. That so it has to be al pi Torah, the river has to al pi Torah, al pi the cheshbon on the seichel of Torah, seichel the kedusha, the river has to part. All the refuah, the big mufsim that they did, it's all mitzad chochmas haTorah. Order 31 gives us a beautiful, like little, not something little. Before that, order 29. Tefillah, even higher than Torah, 29. That Torah, Amshach shadei Torah, Amshach through Torah gam b'mishat irasim nosoi. Even the highest level of Torah, the one whose Torah is his whole occupation, like Rashbi, mibchinas chochma, that's chochma. But the Tefillah mamshich irasim shlemayim b'chochma. But Tefillah is even higher. Even though shall be a chochma ein yisurim b'loy oven, mitzad chochmas haTorah, if there's suffering, it's because there's sin, and if we have to have the suffering to cleanse the sin, but through rotzen there can be a forgiveness even without suffering. Which means to say like this. It'll become clear in order 31. So what exactly is it between Tefillah, the moifus of Tefillah, the healing of Tefillah, and the healing of Torah? So it's noteworthy that to bring here, to point out the teaching of the Maggid. This, which is what we're talking about. Hashem decrees, and the tzaddik mevatl. Hashem decrees the river flows, and Pinchas ben Yair decreed that the river should part for him. Who, k'mashal av she'omer chiddush b'Torah. The father says a chiddush in Torah. V'aben good l'charifusay pilpulay, and the son, because of the great sharpness and pilpul, is analytical. His analysis. So he says the he contradicts his father's words. And the father says, you won. So where's this happening? It's happening in the Olam HaTorah. In the Olam HaTorah, the Yid, the Tzaddik, as it were, is Mechadish, the Mitzad, a Tifere Cheshbon, it's got to be this way. Whereas Tefillah, it's without Cheshbonis altogether. But Tefillah, the change that happens is deserving, not deserving, not. In other words, it's like the tzaddik finds a limbut zchus, a very subtle limbut zchus that can only be discovered through a deep avas yisrael dike Torah. True, but still through Torah. It's still through Torah. It's still with the cheshbon. In the end, he wins the argument. He wins the argument by discovering something that was never said before. It's an emes chiddush. Wasn't there in Torah. In other words, it wasn't there in Torah, as we learned at length, without going to the whole beer now, how the Chidushim work. It's from the Keich HaMaskil, as it were, the parallel within the Nefesh, within Torah. So it's coming from a place that was never articulated, such a Chidush, such a defense, such an argument, such a statement. It's not in the overt dimension of Torah, but the Tzaddik is Megalit, and God exceeds. That's how their Moisim work. Mizem movement continue in the order 31. How is the tzaddik mevatel the decree? He reveals, and in the square brackets, the the famous Gemara in Bava Metzia, which you're all familiar with, that the heavenly court paskened one way, and they paskened down here another way, and Hashem says, you defeated me. Why? Because dafka down here they can mechaven to the pnimius hachachma. Shekeinu al pi chachmas haTorah, because at the end of the day, Bezdin Shalmata, therefore the tzaddik is mechadish and reveals a depth of Torah which is a deeper level within Torah Gufa that says the river should part. That's yes, and the change on the ground should happen. And the Rebbe continues, and that's exactly what happened in the story of Pinchas ben Yoel. If you look further there, in the Magid's Torah, so Pinchas ben Yoel said to the river, he was on the way to do Pidyon Shvoim. He said, if you do not part your river, your waters, I decree the water will never flow. It will never flow again. Who says the Magid? Ella hasbara. He's giving hasbara. Because since I'm doing a mitzvah, the mitzvah has precedence, and I'm being pidyon shvoim, and therefore you have to give way. And if not, you haven't justified your existence. Because the whole world is created b'shvil Yisrael, b'shvil HaTorah. That's part of the Teva itself. He's Magal in the Teva itself. You're only there in order for me to do a mitzvah. So you can't get it. You can't. So the Magid is saying that's the nuance here of the Ha'orah, that it's not that the Gemara is concluding with, and he made a gzeir and it parted. By quoting Rabbi Pinchas ben Yoel, we're being told that Pinchas ben Yoel's conversation, as it were, which was a Torah conversation where he was mechadish, that in this case, my friend, you part your waters. And so it was. So how is that happening? That's happening beside the cheshbon, the chidush, a svara in Torah. Which, as I want to point out, it's not because the tzaddik has a greater, deeper intellect and it's a bigger gone. It's the bittul, his bittul in Torah, Malka Rabbanon, as he said before, in the Maimon itself. Because of the bittul, Malchus, the bittul of the Chachamim, therefore they are mamshich, the meles gzeira. But how they mamshich it? It's through an argument, like a minister who's arguing in defense and presents arguments that are convincing. At the end of the day, yeah, he's machadash and you depth, that in such a case it has such and such has to happen. Whereas tefillah is completely on a cheshbon, inside the Maimon again. But first, we're going to contrast this with the Torah of Rashbi. Rashbi's Torah is not the Torah of the other Tanaim and Amoraim. How so? We're going to see. First of all, in the Torah Guf itself, that he said on this pasuk. So after 31 in the text, yeah. Now the chiddush of the rain coming down. Through Rabbi saying the pasuk, what's the chiddush? It's not like he said a drush that said that when there's a famine, there should be rain. That would also be a chiddush. He's not petitioning and not asking. He's just saying a chiddush. That there's a man of a time of famine. He's giving a Torah that whatever the hasbara is going to be, there should be rain. Whatever that's, but it's not what he said. He didn't address as a famine, didn't address anything. He only spoke about Mata B'chlal. He didn't, there's no hint in his that Torah that the world deserves it. Now, Pinchas ben Yoel, he is saying, in this case, you have to part the river. And he gave his whole cheshbon because we're going to do a mitzvah, pidyon shvuim. He doesn't talk about schusam shel Yisrael. Doesn't talk about they need rain in order to give tzedakah, to give trumas and meises, whatever. I'm just suggesting it. He's not giving any or evoking any schus. Again, it's not a minister arguing and finding a barrister, a lawyer, finding a limit schus that a chiddush, we have to acknowledge that it's true. So he spoke about rain. So we see that it's not a question of an argument. His Torah is legambri higher than the world and just decrees, and that's it. There's no discussion. Just the mile of tefillah, which means it reaches deeper than tefillah. I mean, it reaches like tefillah, it reaches deeper than the mafsim of the Tanaim and Amaroyim, which at the end of the day, there had to be justification. And if there isn't, sorry, can't help you. Epis a limit of schus has to be. Here there's no limit schus, nothing. And that's the mile of tefillah. Yehir rotzen. Your rotzen right now is this way because that's the way it has to be. And now we're saying you're rotzen and you rotzen. And that was the mile of Rabbi Shbi's Torah. We're going to explain later why Dafke his Torah was like this. Let's conclude. Comes out, therefore, the mitzad, the level of Chachmas HaTorah, which is the way the other Tanaim and Amarim did the Mofsim, in brackets, which is Tak Shalom Alam Eshodesh Sha'olam Mitzayah, Takas in the world, it introduces something that the world can't appreciate, a limit schos, a maila, and so on. That wouldn't help. Even mitzad Chachmas HaTorah, in other words, the ordinary tzaddik couldn't do anything here. Through Torah. So how did rain come? Because through his Torah, like tefillah, he draws in the emissar in sof high, even the chachma the Torah, which end of the day is a chidush limit schus, similar to the hamshacha that is done through tefillah. Why dafke Rashbi? This that through Rashbi's Torah, Nimshach made himself the Torah, he draws even higher than the level of Chachma of Torah, which is the other Tanaim and Amaroyim, who, because his Inyan was what? Pnimius HaTorah. Pnimius HaTorah made a Megillah himself. In the end of the Maimer, didn't finish it, but I could see, he's going to explain. It's a hint to anyway. What this is. What is this? Why in Pnimis HaTorah is the Gila of Ein Sof, aside from the fact that it talks about the Likus. But at any rate, fact that in Pnimis HaTorah is the Gila of Ein Sof, which is higher even than the Chachma of Torah, the Lish Rashbi HaYomoke Pnimis HaTorah, since he was the Moke Pnimis HaTorah, in the square brackets, V'gam belimud hanigle shelo yeheira Pnimius. And even in his nigla, the Pnimius is revealed. Lachen the Midas HaTorah Shaloi, therefore his Torah. Himshich begila Ein Sof Shalamayim HaTorah, he draws down the Gila of Ein Sof higher than Torah and makes a change in the ground when there's no justification, period. Not even on the level of Torah, Gluya, of the manifested Torah, which is what the Tanaim and Amaroyim did, and effected change. In this case, that would not work. And he was mamshich to change through mamash agil of Ein Sof. But how? In Torah. Why? Because his Torah is Pnimis HaTorah B'Golim. Let's look at 30, and that's brought a little bit further. It's going to come, as he said. Look at order 34 and see he says something. You see Ayin Beis and Tavshalam and Dalat Amayim for Reb Muga. Like Bomer de Kemami Pasach Rab Shimon Lamed Daled. There it says, quote, he says it more later. He revealed, this is the Nakuda, friends, he revealed the connection between Eden and the Eibishter, not through the means of Torah. Which means in simple language, Rashbi is Magal and his Torah the following. A Yid needs panos. No matter what Cheshbenis of Seder Shtal says, no, it's had all his history and past, and who knows what, he's not getting it now. That's a Vadanisht. And even Sad Chochmas of the Torah, with every limud schus that the Tanoim and Amaroyim could find, also know. Sagt Ashbiya in his Torah. Why? Because his Torah, he reveals the kesher of Eden with the Eibishter, which is hidden in Torah. That he saw Kodmon L'chol Dover. And he saw a Yid is even hidden in Torah. The highest levels of Torah. And even Tzad HaCheshben, there's not, so he's Megala. That he's going to explain this later further in the Maimer. Okay, so I see the Chevra going to Daven, 9:15.